Hello and welcome to the Finding Success and Confidence in College workshop. This is a remote workshop brought to you by the ASAP Resource Center. That's the ASAP Tutoring Center located at LaGuardia Community College in room B208. My name is David Rose. I'm the coordinator of the Resource Center. I'm in charge of academic support functions here at LaGuardia Community College's ASAP program. And today I'm just going to give you guys a pretty robust overview of what I like to call the meta or strategy in college, right? This is how you can find success and confidence in college through special techniques, right? Now, a little bit of background on this presentation. I got my undergrad at Stony Brook University in political science. I went on to get my master's at City College in nuclear security. And so, I've gone through a lot of kind of learning material here, and a lot of the lessons I can tell you are kind of born out of that experience. Having come out of college myself not too long ago, I can remember what it was like being, a fresh-faced high schooler coming into college, and I realized the changes that happened to me between my entrance in college and my exit, and I want to share that knowledge with you, right? So please, give me the next hour and a half. You can put this on in the background. Maybe you want to, browse and shop on Amazon or something. But, I encourage you to listen to what I have to say. You don't necessarily have to memorize it. You can pause this video at any time if you find that I'm discussing something interesting, or maybe you want to look at my presentation. There's very detailed slides. So I encourage you, pause this video, read over what I'm showing you, use the resources I'm showing you, right? But other than that, it's not like I need you to sit in complete and utter silence for the next hour and a half. But have a relaxed listen and consider the following concepts that I'm going to discuss with you, right? So the first thing I want to do is talk about the idea of studying, right? Studying is a core skill for life, right? Many students associate studying only with school, right? That it's only something that happens with school and you got to be a real egghead to do it, right? But that's not true. Studying is really just another word for learning, and learning is something you do literally all the time. You cannot live without learning, right? The two are inseparable, right? So you might be asking yourself, David, how do I study outside of school? Well, anytime you look up something like a recipe, like how to cook a dish, right? Or directions on how to get to a new location, or a makeup tutorial, or how to dress your hair in a certain way, right? These are all forms of learning, right? Now, of course, maybe the material is a little more basic than academic material, but nonetheless, you are finding a topic you want to learn more about. You're going out there, you're researching it, right? So, using the example of how to dress your hair, maybe you find a tutorial, but you're like, that's not my hairstyle, and my hair doesn't act like that. I need another tutorial. You're judging information. You're saying, I'm looking for info, but based on what I'm seeing here, I don't think this is a tutorial for me, right? And, even memes and their relevancy is a form of learning and studying, right? Knowing that a certain meme format is very out of date is something you can only pick up by looking at memes every day and kind of judging what's popular and what's not popular, right? If you play any kind of video games and you look up their tactics and strategy, that's also learning. That's actually a pretty standard form of learning, or standardized, right? You might be looking for a guide on a boss battle, right? So you'll go on the internet and search, how do I defeat this guy, right? If you're learning to drive or to build something or to fix something, these are all forms of learning that you do. And the same mechanisms of learning, of practicing a material, of judging material, they all happen in college, right? Many students seem to think it's some magical process that occurs, but it's very similar to what you see here, right? So let's talk about a little bit of the structure, right? Because I'm a big fan of knowing what I'm about to get into before I get into it, right? College is about learning, and you're going to hear me say that many, many times this presentation. But this learning occurs in a certain structure, right? Knowing the structure and how you're being asked to learn, the conditions, is very useful in order to make sure you don't run into any trouble, right? So here's just kind of a quick glance of the different ways you're going to learn in college. Now, it starts off with in-class learning. A lot of students seem to think that that's the only thing that matters, and they're shocked when they go to all the classes and do nothing else outside of class and they fail, right? It's because the majority of learning actually occurs outside of the classroom, right? It takes the form of tutoring and group study, or self-study in the form of reviewing special material, right? Or self-study in the form of looking at your readings, your homework, your notes, right? The class notes. That's why you take these class notes, right? So to kind of give you an idea of how you should approach this, right? I'm going to start off with a little bit of a mental exercise, right? We're going to go over a student mindset. And to be candid, I pretty much base this off how I saw school when I was young, right? Because I'll tell you that although I was a good student and I cared about doing well in class, I wasn't always so proactive about learning. In fact, I would describe myself as a very lazy student. I didn't want to do extra work. I wanted to get my degree and I wanted to live my life free of, horrific impediments. And we're going to go over this, right? So these are pretty standard assumptions that students take when attending school, and I'm going to tell you what they are and then also kind of explain why they're not illogical, but why they might actually not be the best path forward, right? So the first assumption, and has to do with time maximization, is I have to go to school, but I want to spend as little time doing the work as possible. That's normal, right? You don't want to make this any harder than it has to be, right? That's logical. That's a form of time maximization. I should try to do all my schoolwork as fast as possible, hopefully in one sitting so it doesn't take up all my time, right? That's a form of time management, right? So it makes sense. It's a very crude form of time management in that you're thinking, if I just devote 6 hours to writing this paper here and now, I'll get it done. But it's pretty crude, and we're going to find out why that's not the best way and why that's actually one of the harder ways to do this, right? Another assumption is school is really confusing, so there's a lot of stuff I should ignore. This is called signal focusing, right? You're overwhelmed. You're trying to just focus on what is important. So it's not a bad impulse, but to ignore things in school is a very dangerous thing. And, I encourage you to remember, you came here to learn, not to know. So if you find something and you don't know that much about it, don't be scared. It's okay to ask questions. You should research first and try and figure it out. But it's okay to ask questions. You came here to learn, right? Another assumption is I only really pay attention to school when class is in session. Now, this is an observability thing, right? If I'm in class sitting with my professor and he's talking at me and I'm distracted, it'll be a lot easier to realize I'm not focused, right? So it's very observable whether or not I am listening to school or not in the classroom. However, what these students forget is there's a lot of components of college that occur outside of the classroom, right? And they're not overwhelming, but you need to take care of them. Otherwise, they're going to come back to bite you in the butt, right? Assumption number 5, I just need to do well enough to pass. I don't really care if I understand, right? This has to do with benefit association. These are the types of students who are like, if I just get that A, I'll move on with my life, and whatever happened here will never be a problem. All learning is interconnected, so you're really going to want to pay attention and understand to the best of your abilities, right? I mean, I'll be candid, your goal is still to get a good grade, but you don't want to reject the worth of the material. That's going to make understanding why you're learning this a lot harder. And I'll help you kind of digest what I mean by this if it sounds vague, right? So just countering these traditional views, right? Going back to this idea of you have to go to school, but you want to spend as little time doing the work as possible, right? This is tied to your drive to work efficiently. That's not a bad thing, right? If you were asked to clean up rice that had spilled on the floor, would you use a broom or your hands? The answer is probably a broom because it's faster and easier, right? I want you to use the broom too. That's why I'm teaching you all of these proactive strategies that, yes, they ask for work up front. Yes, I'm asking you to be proactive, but in the long run, they're going to make your life easier. You're going to go through college without panicking. You're not going to have horrific stress all the time, right? You will feel better following my advice, right? As for the idea of doing all your work as fast as possible in one sitting, this is a time to task fallacy, right? The assumption is if I just focus up, if I ignore my phone for 6 hours and I just work really hard, I'll get all the work out of the way and I'll hand it in and I'm done. And I didn't have to manage any of these weird study sessions. It was just a 6 hour block between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. the day before my paper was due. And I've done that before as an undergrad, so I know. And I'm going to tell you that that's making it harder. You didn't have to spend that much time doing it. You probably wrote a worse paper because you were up until 5 a.m. You're picking the hard road. You're picking to spend 6 hours to create C quality work instead of spending 3 hours spread across, a few days to create an A+ paper, right? The other assumption that a lot of students run into, of course, school is very confusing, so there's a lot of stuff I should ignore. Don't be afraid of what you don't know in college. You came here to learn, not to know. It's okay, right? But when you're uncertain, read about stuff. Look for written material first. If you're wondering, how does LaGuardia handle financial aid? Read about it a little. Try and figure it out on your own. Don't just run to the nearest ASAP personnel and say, hey, I have a question. Because you're going to be using a lot more time to get your answers that way than if you just research it yourself. And again, don't worry, I'm going to teach you exact steps you can take to investigate and understand these kinds of things, right? Um, the other assumption, I only really pay attention to school when class is in session. This is classic me. But the problem with that is you are going to constantly feel rushed. Everything is going to be an ambush. They're going to have a FAFSA deadline coming up. You're going to be like, what? I got to get all my stuff together in the next 3 days? Like, I wish someone had warned me earlier. Chances are we did. Chances are it's in an email. If you look through your email right now, you might find an advisor has already emailed you with all the important dates for the upcoming semester. Most students don't read, so they, wake up on October or late October where the financial aid deadline is right around the corner, and they're in a panic. They're like, oh my God, So don't let that be yourself. You want to act early. It lets you overcome unforeseen obstacles. And again, we'll be unpacking all of this, right? The final assumption is I just need to do well enough to pass. I don't really care if I understand, right? I'm going to be candid that the worth of your college degree comes not only from knowing special material, but from demonstrating you can undergo the learning process semi-independently, right? And also 4-year classes are going to be harder without your fundamental skills in order, right? So let's say you're taking Math 115 and you cheat your butt off and you make it through somehow and they don't catch you. By the way, if they catch you, it's like instant expelling, so don't cheat. But anyway, so let's say you made it through some miracle. Congratulations, you're going to find yourself in Calculus 1 and you don't know anything. And now prepare to be even more lost, right? So don't cheat. Don't, rush through the material. Try and absorb it. You might need it later. And we'll, again, unpack this further, right? So to kind of counter this traditional view where, school is something icky, I want to minimize my interaction here. I want to minimize my time investment and my mental strain while passing, so I'm going to ignore things. I'm going to only focus on the important things and just pray that nothing finds me, right? That's not the way you should go about this, right? Now I'm going to flip the script on you. I'm going to give you a metaphor for college via Mario Kart, right? Mario Kart is a game. It's about racing. It's lots of fun. Hopefully you've played it. If not, just understand that I'm talking about a little racing game where we will be racing cars, right? Imagine your friend bet you $8,000 if you beat all of Mario Kart in under 5 minutes, right? Or whatever time, it doesn't matter. And he scheduled a tournament of races to happen from September to December, just like your classes, right? For financial aid recipients, there's kind of a caveat here where if you win, you get that money. Congratulations. It'll be in the form of your education. If you lose, if you fail enough classes, your financial aid might have to be paid back because they're like, you weren't even trying, you weren't even attending class, etc., etc. So you might have to pay back that $8,000, right? So there's a lot on the line here, right? This is a metaphor for college, right? Now, assuming that you accepted this challenge from your friend, you're not just going to sit there and be like, bet, I'll see you in September. I'm not even going to think about this until the day it's happening, right? No, you would actually look through things and prepare stuff. Maybe look at new strategies, techniques, and practice a little bit, right? So if you accepted that challenge, you would prepare before the tournament starts, right? Maybe boot up the old Nintendo and race a few laps, right? Practice the maps and time yourself so you can say, okay, all of these maps, I'm going to whoop his butt and I'm definitely going to get that $8,000. But Rainbow Road, that's a tough cookie, right? You also wouldn't wait until September to start, right? You wouldn't wait until the tournament is in effect to train. You would train beforehand, right? In addition to that, you might start looking at YouTube videos. So there's a secret little shortcut in Rainbow Road where if you jump off the track, you can cut the race in half. You would watch a tutorial because that's a special skill you want to learn, right? And then finally, you would mark the race days on your calendar so you don't miss them. You don't sleep through the race and forfeit your $8,000, right? This is how you should kind of be treating college, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a timed and scored process. Just how our tournament was timed and scored, and it's happening from September to December, our college experience is going to happen from September to December and is timed, right? You will be graded, right? Specifically, we call this semesters. So you need to prepare for each semester to make sure you do well during that time period. And that's really the only time you're going to be tested in college, right? So in light of all this, you should be willing to adopt new strategies to do well in college in the most efficient way possible, right? So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about this college experience. I want to flesh out some of the big picture stuff first so you understand where you are as a college student, what your plans are, and why you are doing this, right? So first, let's talk about your academic journey. You are getting your associate's degree in LaGuardia Community College. There's such thing as an Associate of Arts and an Associate of Science, but we're not going to get into that right now. They're very similar degrees. They're both a college degree, right? Uh, these degrees will require 60 credits, right? So for your associate's degree, you want to take enough classes to earn 60 credits. But wait, it's not just any old classes. It's the classes required by your major. You can look this up on DegreeWorks. You can also Google something called the LaGuardia Course Catalog and look up your major. And it'll say, hey, you wanted to be a political science major? Awesome. These are the classes you need to take. And from there, you can start to understand. This is also something you could talk to your advisor about, right? Your academic journey is also going to include studying for exams, projects, and papers. Yes, you are going to have to spend time preparing this, right? In fact, a lot of time, right? You're also going to learn to use research databases, which are a special type of database, much stronger than just Google, that allow you to access ironclad information. And not only are you going to access it, but you're going to cite that information using citations. APA and MLA are probably the two most common that you're going to encounter here. They're both very useful. And, they're a little complicated, but honestly, once you get into them, they're not that bad. So, don't worry about that right now. We're not going to jump into citations. But finally, I want you to also be aware that this is going to require effort in the form of you spending time studying or preparing for class outside of the classroom, right? That's really the key to success at LaGuardia. So moving on, let's just take this big picture view, right? We know that you're in your associate's degree, but overall, let's say you want to get your college degree, you want to get a good, cushy job that you enjoy, right? You don't want to work a job you dislike, you want a job you like. So you're going to study things to help you access those jobs to have skills, right? Now, what level of college you go to varies, right? Some people can walk away with their associates, some people can walk away with their bachelor's, some people can walk away with their master's. It's really up to you. I would say the further the better, with the exception of the doctorate degree. Now, I'm not saying the doctorate degree isn't worth it, but, let's say you want to work for a big company, right? A doctorate degree is more an academic than a private business degree. So if I'm a doctor of history, it's not going to really help me in the job market outside of academics, right? Only colleges would be like, oh, cool, you study history, like come through. Maybe an art museum or some other specialized organization like that. But it's not that much a commercial degree at that point, if you understand the distinction, right? And again, your associate's degree is your first 60 credits. Your bachelor's is the next 60 credits. And the good thing is you're cutting it in half by getting your AS degree first, right? And then your master's degree, which is I think another 40 or 60 credits depending on the program in question. And then at that point, you can either get your job, you can go out to your doctorate. Trust me, you'll have plenty of time to figure this out the deeper you go. Another thing I want to kind of point out about the college experience is that as you go higher up on this ladder, from associates to bachelor's to master's to your doctorate, right? You could even get a postgrad. These are areas where you're going to find that it's going to sound counterintuitive. College gets funner, right? Just using myself as an anecdote, when I came to college, I loved political science. I was like, teach me everything. I want to learn it. And in the beginning, they were like, oh, great. Here's algebra and English. And I was like, no, no, no. I don't want to do literature. I don't want to do math. I want to do political science. I jumped through the hoops. I took those initial classes. It was kind of boring, whatever. I had to do it. I passed. I moved on. And then as I got higher in my education, my classes became more and more specialized towards political science. So I can tell you, first year at Stony Brook, I was taking remedial math. I was taking, statistics, all this stuff that I was like, why am I even here? But within 2-3 years, I would be studying, illicit international markets, which was really cool. And in my master's, we got to study nuclear security, which was just so cool, right? So the higher you go, the more interesting it'll be for you, right? So don't think it gets harder. Don't look at your master's degree and be like, whoa, I don't know if I'm good enough to even be there. Don't worry about that. Just worry about learning what's in front of you. And if you like the topics, if you like the material, your passion will guide you through that, no problem, right? But anyway, so moving away from the distant future or 2 to 3 year future, let's just look at our associate's degree. I don't want to overwhelm you thinking about your whole future right now, right? But your associate degree should take about 2 to 3 years. And the example I'm showing you assumes no class failing, right? So you can see in fall session 1 and 2, you will take a grand total of 15 credits. In spring 1 and 2, you will do the same, and then you will repeat it for another year. Thus, you should get your 60 credits and be awarded your associate's degree, right? Each academic semester takes about 14 weeks. There's, a long and a short semester, but for my purposes, I'm going to focus on the long semester, right? So here you are looking at your academic semester. It's 14 weeks running from September to December. right? And you should be taking anywhere from 3 to 4 classes. I mean, the schedules vary. Don't panic if what you have doesn't look exactly like this. You can always double check with your advisor, and they'll gladly ensure that everything is in order. But if you want to look it up yourself, look at the classes you're taking. Google LaGuardia course catalog and look at your major's requirements and line up the classes to the requirements. This is okay to do. It's not, legal. That's you researching your own place in the institution, which we're actually going to learn more about, right? But let's talk a little bit more about this 14-week unit because this is really what I want to prepare you for, right? The way these units play out determines your outcomes. So we were talking about, your dream job and getting to your master's and your doctorate and your, all this other jazz. It sounds like a lot, right? It sounds like, whoa, I have to be a completely different person to be jumping in a master's degree. Well, the path to that point in your life is going to take the form of these 14-week units, right? Each 14-week unit is going to generate grades, and those grades are going to be the way you move forward in higher education, right? So your goal is to be as prepared as you can be for these 14 weeks. Think of it as a marathon. You're a professional marathon runner. You're going to run this thing, right? You're not going to just sit on your butt watching television until September 8th, the day before classes. You're going to prepare, right? Uh, College instructional models differ from high school instruction. We're going to go over that, but if you're fresh out of high school, remember that this is going to be a slightly different experience, right? Your primary task in college is actually to devote sufficient time to each class to pass with a good grade. This includes out of class time. I'm going to be saying that a lot, right? Be prepared to use time out of class in the library to go over the material you were shown in class. And the sooner you get that habit in, the easier life will be, right? Uh, Doing anything that helps increase your efficiency and time available during these 14 weeks is beneficial. So if you can prepare for class before class starts, that gets you that much extra time during the semester to do work, to breathe, to feel okay, to review, because you got tasks out of the way ahead of schedule, right? So this is a recipe to go through college stress-free and with confidence, right? So let's just talk about what high school was like, and let's talk a little bit about what college is like. And I might even throw in a funny story, or at least a story that I think is funny, right? So in high school, teachers metered their learning to the pace of the class. If you slowed down, they slowed down, right? A good example of this is I will never forget it. In high school, I was in a AP Spanish course, and we were taking an exam on a certain verb tense, and I will remember the teacher was very angry when she was handing back this quiz. She was like, none of you studied. You don't take my class seriously. I'm going to have to delay the exam. The grades were so bad, I had to curve this quiz with 15 points. And my friend behind me, a kid named Casey, suddenly throws up his arms and screams, I only got a 15. Meaning that he got literally every question wrong on a multiple choice exam, which is pretty impressive. Um, but the point being is that my teacher saw, oh, my class is struggling. This kid legit got a 0. We need to prepare more before I give you the exam. That's not going to happen in college, right? And we'll see why. Uh, the other thing about high school is your enrollment was automated. You completed a grade and everything just was kind of set up that you come back, you'll get a new homeroom, you'll go to your next class, whatever, right? College kind of requires you to be active about record keeping. They're going to ask you for information, and if you just don't respond, like you might get kicked out of class, you might, not be able to enroll. Like they're not just going to magically fix things for you. You need to be on top of it, right? The other thing in high school is your success was semi-guaranteed. Now, I don't mean that in a you guys didn't try. I'm sure it was difficult. I remember high school. I remember taking Regents exams. That was tough. But at the end of the day, the No Child Left Behind Act and just the nature of public education incentivized everyone to pass you before you failed. So I'm sure you had those friends who like barely attended class and somehow still got by with like a C and got their degree, right? This might come back to haunt them down the line as they're lacking certain material. Now, if you were one of those students who was not going to class that often, it might be a different experience in high school or in college where, 3 absences and you're out of the ball game, kid. Like you're wasting our time. 3 absences, right? So this is a different arena where you're really being judged on your performance, right? Now the good news is that there's ways you're going to be judged. Let's jump into the actual details, right? In college, professors teach as per schedule, right? In the syllabus, meaning that you have to keep up, right? If one week the professor is going over the Krebs cycle, and the next week he's going over valence shells, which are all topics in chemistry or physics, or maybe bio actually, all three maybe, maybe just chem and bio actually. But the point being is that you have to keep up with it. He's going to throw topics at you, and think of his lecture as the introduction, and then you go home and you finish learning it, right? So if you're learning about the Krebs cycle and you go to class and whatever, you learn what you can from the professor, but you didn't quite get it, right? You don't just leave it like that. You grab YouTube or you grab a tutor and you say, teach me about the Krebs cycle. I'm sure you could YouTube Krebs cycle tutorial and someone will have a wonderful tutorial breaking it down. If you come to a tutoring center, you can ask for bio tutors, and I'm sure someone will be able to tutor you and teach you the Krebs cycle, right? But the point is you are trying to keep up with the learning, right? You're not expecting the professor to slow it down for you, right? Another thing is that your enrollment is not automated. You have to enroll each semester and do it early because classes are on a first come, first serve basis, right? And I can tell you in Stony Brook, when I was, willy nilly not paying attention to anything, there were times I had to sign up for classes very late, and that made me have to take classes, an 8 a.m. math class is not, I mean, I don't like mornings, I don't like math, feel me? So putting those two things together was a nightmare. I made it harder than it had to be because I wasn't paying attention, right? Um, Another aspect is that you need to learn to self-represent, right? For example, there are times that we can mail you a Metro card, but there are kids who have the wrong address in CUNY first, and then they don't get a Metro card, and then they start saying, this isn't fair, the program cheated me. Did we really cheat you, or did you not know where you live? Because we don't know where you live. I can't look at your CUNY first file and be like, what? That's not where Johnny lives. Johnny lives in Queens, right? I can't change that. You have to look through it and make sure your files are in order. And this is going to be good lessons for how you might interact with a bank, right? Or any institution for that matter, where it's like you're self-representing. You need to make sure your details are correct, right? No one else is going to do it for you, right? The last thing I'll tell you is that your success in college is not guaranteed unless you make the right preparations. Now, notice I said preparations. I didn't say anything about smartness. College is not about being smart, right? Whether or not you pass or fail college has nothing to do with how quote unquote smart you are. In fact, I hate that word. There's no such thing, right? If you meet someone and they're going through a class where they know all the answers, they barely have to do the reading, it's because they learned that before. They were involved in that learning process before. I can remember vividly taking history courses where people will be like, oh, David, how do you know all this stuff? You're so smart. And it's like, no, I just spent the last 10 years watching History Channel documentaries. So I remember tidbits from here and there. I'm just using my old learning that I've already done, right? So whether or not you get through LaGuardia has nothing to do with smartness. You are all smart enough. And trust me, I've been working at community colleges for 10 years in tutoring. So I've been working with kids in the trenches, young students who need to learn, or even older students who need to learn the meta, right? And the one thing I always find is that they're all capable, right? It's just a matter of how you use your time, right? So my key advice for you on this slide is be self-aware and be responsible for yourself. If something is wrong with your files, you move to correct them. You don't just ignore it. You don't just expect someone else to clean it up after you, right? But, with all of this pressure to do well in the 14 weeks that are coming, you might say, David, how can I actually jump into this? I'm worried. I want to make sure I'm doing good. So let me give you an initial view of it. We're going to go over this in more detail, right? This is a basic view of the academic structure, right, of college. In the pre-semester, you're going to want to download your syllabus, which is an important document that covers all the details of your college class, and we'll go over what that is and more. You want to mark important dates with reminders 1 week prior. So you can whoop out your phone, you can look at the syllabus. If the syllabus says your exam is on October 30th, you might, press the little button on your phone and say, hey Google, set a reminder on October 23rd, math exam in 1 week. And you do that for all the exams. Yeah, you put 2 week reminders, right? You're never going to get ambushed by a test. You're never going to get ambushed by a homework. Nothing is ever going to surprise you. You aren't going to stay up at night wondering if you forgot anything, right? That's a good feeling. You want that feeling, right? So pre-semester, you can download your syllabus. You go through it for each class. The syllabus will be available on Blackboard, right? and you can look through the material to examine the topics covered, set your alarms, right? You can also buy books for class. I know that there's a benefit program, so maybe you want to wait for that, but Google them, right? Find the books on a PDF. Sometimes you can find them for free, right? If you have time, read a few chapters or Google the chapter topics, right? If there is a math class and you don't have the math textbook, that doesn't mean you're helpless. You can still look through the syllabus and be like, oh, week 2 is FOIL. What is FOIL again? Let me Google FOIL tutorial on YouTube. And I guarantee you there'll be some, really nice tutor guy or girl teaching you the material on YouTube, right? So there's nothing stopping you from tackling this material earlier, right? Khan Academy is another really good one. And I guarantee you, if you do this, if you do that, look through the syllabus before class starts and just Google all of the topics and say the first month, you're going to find that this is easy as pie. Because you're going into class and you're like, Professor, today you're going to teach me about FOIL. What do you got to say? I know it has something to do with multiplication of, variables. Or does it? Usually it does. I think it does. Anyway, the point being is that you can tackle this material ahead of time and get a lot of the mysticism out of the way. And the experience you have in class when you go there knowing what to expect is going to be far easier on you than if you went in there completely unaware of what you're about to experience, right? So you can prepare this way, you can get that ready before the 14-week timer even starts, right? During the 14 weeks, during the actual semester, you want to attend all your class sessions, right? The number of students who just don't come to class the first couple of weeks is astounding, right? In fact, I do a lot of data analytics for the ASAP program, and one thing we found is that students who are absent, it's highly correlated to grade. And it's not that, every absenteeism is just so horrifically critical to the learning process, but it speaks about their dedication. The kid who's like, oh, I don't really care if I'm absent 5 times, none of this matters. When exam time comes, he said it himself, none of this matters. He's not going to study that hard, right? So he's not going to do as well. But the student who's like, I need to make it to class. I paid for this. I have to go there. My performance depends on it. They're taking this stuff seriously. So even if every class is not, 1,000% super useful, attending every class is a sign of your dedication, and that dedication pays dividends, and our data shows that, right? Um, the other thing you want to do is perform all assigned readings. Let me tell you that if you took young David Rose or Rose out of Stony Brook and you said, David, you have to do every assigned reading, I would pass out. I would be shook, right? Uh, the fact of the matter is you want to do assigned readings, even if they're not checking for it, especially if they're not checking for it, because they will check for it on the exam. What a lot of professors actually do is they'll write the exam first, and then they'll use the material that they use to write the exam to create the class. So there is a reason you're getting that assigned reading, right? Another thing, and this is something I didn't learn until my master's program, you want to take notes on the assigned reading as if you were about to be tested on them. And I know this sounds crazy. I know this sounds horrifically overwhelming. But the fact of the matter is if you do this for all of your class each week, you're going to find that when the exam period runs around, there's no surprises. You know exactly what you're getting into. You feel confident. There's no weird curveballs. There's no questions that you didn't understand because you have exposed yourself to all the learning material and you've tried to digest all the learning material. Anecdotally, I'll tell you that, when I was in my master's program, I had a professor. This is at this Colin Powell School for Foreign Policy over at City College, right? And we had a lady, Professor Brave Boy Wagner. What a name, right? Brave Boy Wagner. Brave Boy is actually a Native American indigenous name, right? A last name. But she was Professor Brave Boy Wagner, and I believe she was teaching me 2 classes, but the one in question right now is foreign policy analysis. And that is a difficult section, right? But I'll tell you that every day she would start off class, and this was a class of like 8 kids, by sitting us down and going in a circle and asking us what we understood of the assigned reading. And it scared the daylights out of me, and I started taking notes on that every week. Let me tell you that demystified everything. And it felt like I was going an extra mile, but I realized that I wasn't doing anything extra. I was actually just nailing everything down and securing my understanding of the material, right? Of course, you want to complete all assigned homework. The number of students who seem to not hand in homework and then hand it in all at the end is astounding. And let me tell you that that's making it far harder than it has to be, right? Your ability to learn and keep up with the class is supported by homework. So even if the professor's like, you can hand in all the homework at the end of the year, I don't care. You should still keep up with the homework because it's going to inform what you're learning in that scheduled experience we talked about in the syllabus, right? If the homework was really hard, if you had to take it to a tutor, study it again, right? And remember to, of course, take it to a tutor if you're having trouble, right? And you want to study for all exams using a study sheet. I will help you get access to what I mean by that a little later on in the video, right? So just to reiterate what we've discussed so far, and I know that it's a lot, we're talking about learning in college. We're pointing out that it's timed, it's happening in these 14-week units, and that you need to learn efficiently during these 14-week units, right? Our solution is that you're going to be ready to adopt new practices in order to maximize your learning ability and the ability to cover curriculum, right? You want to take time to implement the study strategies. It's one thing to be like, yeah, Dave, I know that it's good to take notes, and it's another thing entirely to take notes and then take an exam because you're going to feel the difference. You're not just going to know about it, you will feel the difference, right? Another challenge is that the material in college is complex. In the beginning, I told you about memes and how to do your makeup and how that's study, and yeah, that is. But that material is pretty simple, right? College material tends to be a little bit more complex, so you need to use special sources like Wikipedia, Khan Academy, YouTube, any number of LaGuardia tutors, the LaGuardia Library. All of these are specialized tools that can help you prime yourself for learning, right? Additionally, your professor might have some material if you visit him during the office hours, right? And you want to always have the aim of documenting all of your notes, be it class notes, homework notes, reading notes, exam notes, whatever it might be, into a study sheet. And that will massively help you for every class. It's literally something you can use in every LaGuardia class. And we'll go over a little bit more detail, right? So I've been telling you about this college experience. I've been telling you about the 14 weeks. I've been telling you that you have to study during these 14 weeks, that you'll be timed. But I want you to kind of get a sense of the materials you'll be holding in your hands, right? The things you physically have to do. So let's start off with the syllabus, right? The syllabus, I've mentioned it before, but I'm just kind of ironing it out and hammering it home that it's a very important document that is available for all your classes, right? It will outline everything you need to know, including the test dates, the readings, the homeworks, the books, your professor's office hours, etc. And you can see in the funny little comic that all these students are coming up and asking her questions, and the answer is always it's in the syllabus. So read it through thoroughly. Keep a copy on your computer. Keep a copy printed out in your backpack. Yes, you want to bring that bad boy to class, because if you're having trouble one week, you might be like, oh man, this material is tough. When's that exam? You can open up your syllabus to immediately see the answer to that, right? So the syllabus is where it all starts, and you can find your syllabus by accessing Blackboard and logging into Blackboard, right? So we've kind of already gone over the pre-class preparations, but now that you know what the syllabus is and where to get it, you want to go through it, mark down those dates on your phone. Like we said, you set that reminder 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks ahead of time. You want to check the syllabus for the books you need. Maybe write down all of the books you need on one paper so you don't have to look at 8 syllabuses to know the books. You can also Google the book name in PDF. Who knows what you'll find? Maybe it'll be free. I don't know, right? And ask yourself if you can access any of the material early, right? If you can look at that class material before class starts, that's cash money right there, right? Check the syllabus for your professor's name and office hours and email. I will tell you I was very guilty of going through classes. I didn't even know the number of class. I would just be like, it's the political science class with, the young guy. I forgot the class name. It was bad. It was bad. But you want to know this stuff so that down the line, if you're having trouble, you don't go to a tutor and be like, I don't know what class it was. It was a political science class, but I need tutoring. That's not a good look. They won't know how to help you. You want to be able to be like, yeah, it's a Math 115 algebra course. Could you help me? Right? It also helps to know the professor's name in case, you want to communicate with the guy. That's actually what office hours are for. So a lot of students don't understand that, but office hours are put into schools so that you can visit your professor, in between courses or classes, whatever, just to talk to them. If you find that you really like what they're teaching and you want to teach that or you want to learn more about that or you want to work in that field, go to their office hours and talk to them. If you want to be an accountant, go to your accounting professor and be like, what was it like taking the CPA exam? And he'll be glad to tell you. He loved that stuff so much he decided to teach it, right? So that's what those office hours are actually for. They're there for those kind of one-on-one touch points between students and faculty, right? You can also go there asking for help, but I always suggest you bring material with you. You don't want to just walk in and be like, "Hey, professor, your class is hard. Teach me." It's like, what do you want to learn about? Like there's an entire college course on this. There's a lot to kind of go over. But if you go to him and you're like, "Hey, professor, look, I was reading this part of the textbook, page 232. Here it is. And I didn't understand this one thing about radiocarbon dating. How does this work again?" And he would be glad to explain it to you in most cases, right? If not, you bring him to a tutor, right? So as for in-class learning, now I know all of us have had an interesting last couple of years with Corona. So maybe in-class learning and in-class procedures are not something we're all used to in an in-person setting. Uh, but there's still a way to go about this. So I mentioned the office hours. I mentioned you should go talk to them, right? It could result in a mentorship, right? A lot of my favorite professors helped guide me through the college application process or applying to my master's, right? And they wrote recommendation letters for me, and wonderful ones at that. And it wasn't like I was going to them day one being like, "Hey, I'm going to pick you to write my recommendation letter, so be ready in 3 years." Right? No, that's weird. I would go to them and talk to them about why I like the course or, any questions I had about the course. And then later on, when I visited them again, they'd kind of remember me, right? I also talked a lot in class, so that kind of helps as well. It helps to have that good relationship. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can cultivate that, right? But in terms of actually coming to class, so you have your syllabus, you look through it, you have the dates set, you've saved everything, you are ready and rearing to go. It's time to walk into LaGuardia and actually go to class, right? I suggest a multi-section notebook, and of course a pen. Multi-section notebooks are the notebooks where you can open and they have like manila folders between every couple of pages. That helps to just separate out the notes you're taking. So the first section might be math, the second section might be history, the third section might be first year seminar, what have you, right? But there's an advantage to taking notes by hand. Your brain will actually remember the notes slightly better when you write them versus typing. There are also benefits to typing, right? But when you write it by hand, your brain actually saves two memories. It has the mental memory of you thinking about the concept. So let's say it's, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Maybe you already learned that one in high school, right? Uh, but your brain will remember you thinking that. It might even remember you chuckling because of how funny that phrase is. But then it'll also remember you writing the words out. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So when you're taking that exam and you're sitting down in that room and you're trying to remember what is a mitochondria, your brain has two access points. It can either remember the idea or it can call upon the mechanical memory of writing it, and it will be able to recall better, right? Uh, Whenever a reading is assigned, you want to actually take notes on that reading. Pretend you're going to be tested on it and bring it to class so you can follow along better, right? And just to backtrack real quick, I mentioned laptops. Now, back in my day, it wasn't too easy to get a laptop to class. They had it, but not every teacher was happy about it. Some would be like, "No, turn it off," yada yada yada. I think nowadays it's a little more common. Um, but like I said, there's benefits to handwriting and that mechanical memory concept I just told you about. But then if you're a good typist, yeah, I'll be candid, I played a lot of video games as a kid, so I could type very fast. I got fast enough that I could type what the professor was saying word for word. And it wasn't like I immediately did that out the door. It was like I would get bored. I'm in class for another hour and a half. I need something to put my energy in. Let me just try and write everything this man is saying down. And there's advantages to that because you literally get a transcript of what the professor was saying, right? So that can also be a benefit of laptops versus books, but really any kind of recording the information down, I highly advise. The only thing I would kind of counsel against, and even that, I wouldn't even counsel against it, but don't do it without taking notes, is people who record their professors, right? You can literally take a recording device like a cassette player and record your professor. Now, number one, you always want to ask for permission. You never just start recording him. That's very disrespectful, right? However, if you talk to him, you say, "Hey, professor, I was hoping I could record class just so I could follow along. I'm still going to be taking notes, etc." They'll probably say that's fine, right? But you don't want to just sit back and completely zone out because you're like, "Yeah, whatever, I've got it all recorded, so, it's not a problem." This just means that after class is done, you're going to have to listen again and actually pay attention. So now you're taking class twice. And the second time around, you're not even going to have a professor to ask questions to. So now you're getting like a third of class in terms of actual learning because you're just recording it. And if the recording kind of muffles at some point, Well, I guess that information can never be saved, right? So it's just a very low fidelity method. And if you are recording, that's okay, but you want to make sure you are taking active notes. You are either typing it or writing in the notebook, right? And of course, you also want to bring a copy of the syllabus to class, because if material is, coming along perfect, you might say, "Oh, this is great. What's next?" And you'll get an idea of that, right? If the material is getting kind of hard, you might be like, "Oh, I need time to review. When's the next exam? How much time do I actually have?" So the syllabus is a handy thing to actually keep in your pocket, right? Um, Moving on from in-class learning to out-of-class learning. So this is where a lot of students get surprised. They would be shocked, you know, hurt that college should require your time outside of the classroom, right? If you have a schedule that says you're in class Tuesday 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. and Thursday 10 a.m. until 3 p.m., college is going to involve more than just that. That's just the bare minimum of going to class. You want to review the material you've learned outside of classes, right? The reality is that most of the learning you do in college occurs outside of the classroom. It happens between you and a book, right? Some of the learning takes the form of homework and assigned readings, but the real core is reviewing it in what we call self-guided study. Self-guided study is a collection of practices like using note cards, reviewing study sheets, practice exams, and third-party learning materials to make sure you understand a given topic, right? So examples of what you can do at home or at a tutoring center or as a library is your assigned homework or your assigned readings. That should be pretty obvious. Reviewing and taking notes on those assigned things, right? So if your assigned reading talked all about, Portuguese exploration, maybe take some notes on that so you know what the reading said and you don't have to lug out the textbook and reread 3 chapters to figure out, who did what, right? Another thing is reviewing third-party learning materials. Wikipedia is okay to look at. You can, in fact, I highly encourage you to Google or Wiki your topics in class, right? It might be a little bit harder in some cases. Typically, the mathematics wikis and some of the science wikis can go a little bit harder than they have to because they're written like for scientists. So sometimes it'll be easier for you to look up a YouTube video or a Khan Academy video where someone is teaching this material but at the college level, right? But nonetheless, I always encourage you to look at Wikipedia. You don't have to cite it in an essay, right? It's not the last word on any given subject. However, it is a great place to start to get that idea of what you're getting into, right? To get your bearings, right? Another thing I want to tell you guys about out-of-class learning here is that the location matters, right? You can use the library located in the E building. You can use the ASAP Resource Center located in B208, or really any quiet study space. I personally really like cafes, right? Get myself a nice iced coffee, sit down, and have a grand old time, right? Now, your endurance in studying material is limited. You can't just lock yourself in a library for 48 hours and read textbooks cover to cover. You might collapse of dehydration. It's just not going to be a good time, right? But what a lot of students don't understand is that your environment impacts your study endurance. It also impacts the efficiency of your studying, right? So sitting in a clean, quiet room full of distractions allows you to study longer and more efficiently, right? So if you're reading a textbook on, let's say, the English Civil War, also known as the War of the Roses, I picked this one because a lot of students have no idea what this is. And that's fine. That's actually why I want to use this topic, because it's so weird, right? Where do you think you would focus longer about this, war between two houses in England, right? Would you learn faster if you were sitting in a quiet library where it's just a book in front of you? Would you learn faster standing up on a crowded 7 train during rush hour? Or at a club on a Saturday night? Or at a diner with your friends while they're all eating? Or while at work on your phone? I'm going to tell you that if you spent 3 hours reading this book in each of these situations, only A would actually give you good returns, right? Maybe B. And then depending on how boring work is E. But you shouldn't be doing academic work on your phone. My point is that if you had to read this boring long textbook, or maybe you don't find it boring, I find it really interesting, but I picked an obscure topic for a reason. If you had to learn about this obscure topic and you had 3 hours to study, right? The amount you would learn in each of these scenarios is vastly different, even if you spend 3 hours doing it. I don't know if the 7 train route actually takes 3 hours. I don't think it does. Maybe you just sat on it while it went back and forth. But the point is that the way you use your time impacts the outcome. So although you're using 3 hours, at work reading this textbook, your understanding is only going to be worth 60, 50% what it could have been if you had spent those 3 hours in a library, right? That's something a lot of students don't understand. And they'll just tackle this work, as if it was like a checklist of items that they just have to click on. So they don't go to the library, they do it on their phone at home while watching TV, and then they wonder why college is so hard and why they can't seem to get anything done. It's because you're not using your time efficiently. You want to be in a quiet study space, right? So let's get a little bit more into the advanced tactics here in college, right? I've kind of discussed the base meta. You all understand now that college is going to involve a syllabus. It's going to involve a schedule of events as described in the syllabus, right? It's going to involve studying outside of the classroom, right? Going to the library on your own to look at stuff, or maybe with friends, right? I can tell you that a lot of the study groups I joined, it was just because there was a cute girl in there, and I was like, hey, listen, let's study. But that works, It's just about getting me into a room with the book to sit down and read and take notes, right? So let's jump right into this, right? As we said, every class can be prepared for beforehand, and you want to prepare as much as you can beforehand. It's not the end of the world if you didn't get the opportunity. It's not the end of the world if you're doing it the weekend before class starts, or even the weekend that class started. That's not terrible. Better you do it earlier than later or never, right? So you want to download and print the syllabus. You want to highlight those exam days. You want to highlight the homework assignments. You want to purchase that book and other learning material, right? Even consider reading some of it before class. Don't forget, if you use Google and the word PDF, you might find something, right? You want to create specialized folders on your computer for each class with a copy of the syllabus and anything else you can download. This centralizes all of your work, so if you need to find your Math 115 syllabus, you're not scrolling through 300 icons in your download page, or folder rather. You are just clicking on your Math 115 folder, which should be on your desktop, so you can see all of your material, right? You can use your phone to set reminders for the exams and homeworks. And again, I want to remind you, if I'm going too fast, pause it, go through the steps, and then hit play again when you're ready. It's fine. I'll be here. I'm patient, right? You want to use your phone to set those reminders. I like to do them 2 weeks, 1 week, and 2 days. This way, if I forget the 2-week one, I have the 1-week one, and as like an emergency Hail Mary, I'll have the 2 days, right? For writing intensive courses, search the topics on Wikipedia. This can serve as your primer. For mathematics and STEM, we talked about how Wikipedia might not always be written to the right level. So maybe you want to try YouTube or guided tutorials, but also feel free to use Wikipedia. Don't get scared. Be brave. If anything, one day you will know how to read the material that's there. But I guarantee you, if you look at something like, especially mathematics, some of the explanations can get pretty heavy when you're really doing it on like the professional mathematical level, right? So maybe you want to stick to YouTube tutorials or Khan Academy tutorials for that kind of stuff, right? Or tutoring, which is, free and on campus. Okay, so during these 14 weeks, we are taking our in-class material, we're taking our weekly readings, our exam outcomes, our class and lecture notes, we're reading these materials, we're taking notes on these materials, right? This is happening after class finishes. We take everything, we try to roll it up, we try to understand what we didn't get, right? And then once exam week comes around, which typically happens twice, it'll happen for midterms and for finals, right? You want to prepare a study sheet. You want to go to tutoring. You want to go to group study sessions, right? And this is where all the notes that you were taking before will come into handy, because you will be able to put together a study sheet in an afternoon, and then you just spend the rest of your time examining the study sheet until you know it front and back, right? So again, remember, reinforce and clarify your concepts on your own time. You have to keep up with the material being shown. This is where the proactivity pays off. And of course, you've heard me say it like 50 times. I'm going to keep saying it. Take notes on the readings. Take notes on exam questions. Take notes on lectures, right? This is the key to making it through college. It has nothing to do with being quote unquote smart. Did you take notes? Were you paying attention? Did you record things, right? So a lot of students hear this and they're like, why is it taught like this? Why am I not being taught the old way where the professor metered my learning, right? Part of what makes college valuable is that it demonstrates your ability to learn new material and processes and apply them in a time-based deadline, right? It requires self-sufficiency, the ability to self-teach and take advanced information and use it, what we call information literacy. You can judge information. So let's say you work at an office, right? And our office, let's, just arbitrarily say that it helps process, applications for driver's licenses, right? And one day they come to us with a document saying, this is a new rule for how you apply driver's licenses. And I give you this document. I'm like, hey man, read this over and make sure we're in compliance, right? A college student or a college degree person should be able to read this information and be like, huh, okay, they want us to do X, Y, and Z. We only do X, Y right now. So if we want to be compliant, we got to start doing Z too, and we should be fine. This is information literacy. This is knowing something, learning about something, applying something to what you already know about, and then making a decision. That's what the college degree is really about. It's not about, oh, this kid knows statistics, 120. That's everything we've ever needed and more. No, it's about this person knows how to self-teach and they know some statistics. So we can throw them in different situations and they can learn and adapt to them. That's really the underlying material that makes up the bulk of college's worth, right? And I'll tell you as an example, I mentioned I studied nuclear security for my undergrad, right? That's really cool stuff. Maybe I want to do my doctorate in it, but I'm not working in nuclear security. I'm not working at a nuclear power plant, right? So it's not like everything you learn in college is a one-to-one use. But I can tell you that everything I had learned in my master's program about note-taking, about digesting information, about reading through thick blocks of text, right? That came in handy when I started working in finance, when I started working for an NGO, when I started working at LaGuardia, right? Because all of a sudden they would come to me and they'd say, hey, David, this is a new policy we have to follow. And I'm like, yeah, sure, leave it on my desk and I'll get back to you with some key points, right? Because I feel comfortable digesting this information just the same way you guys as college students should feel comfortable receiving, taking notes, and judging this information, right? Another very common complaint that we get out of students is, when will I ever use this? What is this for, right? That's a very lazy way of looking at the world. You shouldn't wonder, when will I use this? Because the fact of the matter is, if you really wanted to, you don't have to know anything. You better be ready for some pretty low standards of living, but you don't have to know anything, right? The fact of the matter is, this knowledge that we give you, or LaGuardia gives you, is a form of empowerment. You should ask, what does this knowledge allow me to do, right? And sometimes the answers will surprise you. So the example I always like to give is, I've repeated it like 9 times. I was a political science major, and then I mastered in nuclear security. After that, I went to work in finance. And when they were interviewing me in finance, it was for a Chinese investment company, they were like, David, why should we hire you? Why do you want to work here, right? And I explained to them, I feel comfortable working with information. I can understand data, et cetera, et cetera. And they went on to say, okay, Dave, we trust you'd be a good office worker, but why specifically us? What makes you think you're value added to this Chinese company? And I remembered that I had taken a class called Women in Chinese History in Stony Brook. And in that class, we learned a number of great things, but specifically we read a diary of a young girl who grew up in, I think, Chengdu in like the 15th century or something like that. And it was all about her existence as this young girl in Renaissance China and her experience. And when I was taking this class, I thought it was interesting. It really struck me as something where it's like, this is material or perspectives that I would never have thought about. Crying because you're getting married and you're never going to see your sister again is not something I've ever really thought about that much, right? But it expanded my horizon. It left an impression on me, right? And during this interview, I told them, oh, well, you know what? I've had a lot of cultural exposures. I feel that I'm very good at bridging cultures. Let me tell you, when I was in Stony Brook, I took this one class. Are you familiar with this poetry style? Let me tell you about it. And let me tell you, they were enthralled, right? They were like, my God, David does have some kind of insight into the way we operate. He has some interest. Look, he took this very complex course about old poetry style, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that knowledge, it's not something I picked up because I was like, hey, down the line, I'm going to interview for this finance group and I need to tell them this story, so I better take that class. That's not what I said to myself. I was just like, this sounds interesting. And I took it. And then later on, I found a use for it, and it benefited me, right? So you need to look at your classes in the same way. Don't assume the material is useless. right? It's empowering you to do something. And you don't always have the luxury of knowing what you're going to have to do down the line, right? So that's an important concept I want you guys to remember, right? All right, moving on, right? As we said, for these 14-week units, you want to increase efficiency and time availability. You want to do that by getting everything you can out of the way ahead of time, right? Another thing I want to tell you about is kind of the learning process and why you have a natural advantage, right? Let's warp back to that book of the War of the Roses book, the English Civil War textbook that I was telling you we would pretend to read, right? If you read through that first chapter, right, you might not fully understand what's going on, but you might get an inkling, right? And what's going to end up happening as you keep reading is that you will change, right? If we compare David before he read the book to David after chapter 1, I now have like a basic idea of like, yeah, it had the House of Lancaster was involved and this other guy was involved and maybe it's not a perfect understanding, but it's progress. I am not the same person I was before I opened this book and started reading, right? Now here's where the magic happens because that book will never change. If I read to chapter 2 to chapter 3 or maybe even reread chapter 1, the things in that book are not going to suddenly change just because I've read them once before and it's like, aha, let's test them on something new. No, your information is static. It's not going to change. You have to learn about, this, that, and the other. But remember that every time you sit down at that study session, every time you crack open that book and put in effort to understand what is going on, you are making progress. Whether or not it's, hyper super fast progress where you stand up and you're like, Eureka, I got it. I now am a master of Math 115. Thanks, LaGuardia. It's not going to be like that, unfortunately. But there are going to be points where you start getting that traction, right? So I want to encourage you to begin studying or examining the subjects before you get to class. You want to kind of maximize that time advantage. Get prepared, right? Come to tutoring, right? My tutors are very friendly people. I hired them all myself. I tutor as well. So we're all in the trenches together fighting for your academic success, but we need you to put in effort, right? You need to come to tutoring, right? Of course, you also need to come to office hours, right? And of course, if you're interested in more information on tutoring, I'm kind of mentioning it, but not running you through it. You can find more information on the ASAP RC online website. You see right there in the red on the bottom, right? But moving on, tutoring is something that a lot of students look at and they kind of think like, oh, I'm being punished. I did bad in math, so here's more math because you're not studying, so you need to be punished with math. That's not how this works, right? Tutoring at the end of the day is securing your future, right? If you're an A+ student, you should still come to tutoring. And I'll tell you that in my master's program, I did great. But I also went to tutoring all the time because as soon as I finished an essay, I would proofread it, I would do the best to clean it up, and then I would take it to a tutor to review it again. It's because the tutor will catch things that I never could have caught, or at least I didn't catch during my editing phase, right? And I didn't want to go without editing it because it would be kind of embarrassing, right? The other thing I'll tell you is to come early, right? It's a tragedy, but we get a lot of students who show up like on reading day, the last day to prepare for finals, and they're like, hey, I need to go through the next 25 chapters of math. And it's like, do you think this is an efficient way of learning this? This is not good. And the worst part is that if they had shown up and the tutor was absent, well, guess what? You're not getting anything out of this, right? So you busted your butt, you're in a panic, you showed up at the last minute, but circumstance intervened and you're not going to get that help. You could have gotten the help if you didn't come at the last minute, but you chose to wait, right? That comes at a great cost. I also want to encourage you to come prepared to tutoring, right? You want to have some kind of material out of the way, right? If it's an essay and you have assigned readings, do the readings. Even if you don't fully understand them, do the readings, right? Because if you just come to our tutoring centers with literally nothing, our tutors are going to be like, okay, well, it looks like you have to read this and then come on back. Because you're just wasting your time by not preparing anything. It's like you put the food in your mouth, but you're like, I can't chew it. Chew for me, right? We can't do that for you, right? And below that, you'll see steps to access tutoring, right? I'm not going to go through that because we are in a bit of a time crunch. I don't want to waste all your time. You can pause it and look at it if you'd like. But let's move on, right? There are other LaGuardia tutoring centers. The B208 ASAP Resource Center is not the only tutoring center. There is also the Writing Center, and you can see their URL. There is the SGA Tutoring Hall, and there is the MEC and MAT Tutoring Hall. All of these guys cover pretty much everything you can possibly take. SGA covers everything. Writing Center covers anything written, and the mech and math people will do engineering and every level of math, right? If you're interested in these kind of study tactics that I'm telling you, where I'm like, do this to prepare your study sheet, I encourage you to follow the steps on the screen. You can pause them if you need to read them. I'm not going to read them out loud here, but you can follow these steps to watch another video that I made, which goes over a lot of these study tips and tricks. And you'll notice that there's like several slides that I lifted. This presentation is actually built using several old presentations that I kind of glued together because I wanted to give you guys that holistic breakdown, right? Another thing I want to make you aware of is the library. A lot of students don't understand that the LaGuardia Library is a wonderful resource, right? If your professor says, hey, I need you to write about social conditions in the Bronx using scholarly sources only, that might be a tough research project. You can go to the library and be like, hey, librarian, I'm studying, this topic, and I'm looking for material. Do you think you could help me research? And they can help you. Even better, if you pick a bunch of articles, if you go on the library website and you use OneSearch, or even let's say you don't know how to use OneSearch. Let's say you don't know anything about looking through databases. Go to the library and tell them, I'm a LaGuardia student. I'd like to know more about accessing databases. Could you teach me? I guarantee you they will jump for joy that they get to show you the ropes. The librarians are very good, happy people. You should want to look to work for them, or with them rather. They'll help you with all manner of kind of information literacy issues, right? Now, if you haven't noticed, a lot of this presentation has been designed around what we call procrastination, right? And procrastination is something that is, it's not illogical, but it's something that makes getting work done harder than it has to be. And I find that a lot of students are not willing procrastinators. They don't want to, but they're just kind of stuck doing it, right? And the cycle can be vicious. It generates stress, right? At the end of the day, procrastination is kind of a desire to maximize your time off. You want to relax, right? You want to watch Netflix. You want to just chill. You don't want to have to be forced to do stuff, right? But it's also tied to a desire to do things perfectly and efficiently. In the sense that if you didn't care, you wouldn't have done anything anyway, so you wouldn't be a procrastinator, you just wouldn't do any work, right? But you're also waiting until the last minute so that you're under full pressure to get the work done in one sitting to secure it and walk away, right? The reality is that avoiding your work, avoiding this idea of tackling your weekly reading or your weekly homework so that you can do nothing for that week is going to cost you in the long run. And in fact, it's going to cost you immediately because any time you spend not doing your work will generate anxiety because you know you didn't do your work. You know that deadline is closing in, right? So even if you're like, okay, I have a project due in a month, let me take 29 days of video game time, and then on day 30, I'll finish the project. Okay, anything after like day 15, you're going to start sweating that there's a project rolling around the corner, and you're going to have to bust yourself to get it done, right? So you'll actually generate anxiety by not doing anything. And then finally, the last minute rush is going to produce lower quality work, guaranteed, right? If you write that paper in an all-nighter, there are going to be mistakes you can't catch because you were up all night, right? And let's say you're like, oh, I know that. That's why I'm taking it to a tutor. What if you get there and the tutor's not in, right? They were sick that day. All of a sudden, no double checking, and it's not the tutor's fault. Anyone can get sick, right? It's your fault for waiting till the last minute and coming with like a 10-minute window to actually get your homework checked, right? Being proactive at the end of the day means you will do less work and produce better results. So remember that story I told you about where to study the English Civil War book for 3 hours? We can all spend the 3 hours in different places, but the amount we learn will vary drastically depending on where we were learning, right? Another way to kind of envision this difference is the following, right? And full disclosure, I am the procrastination approach student. Like that was my experience in early undergrad, right? By my master's program, I was really in the proactive approach, but let's go through it. So a procrastinating student will download the syllabus on the first week, but they just leave it in the downloads folder. It takes too much time to create an empty folder, and for what? There's just one file. I don't care. Leave it in the download folder, right? Week 2, you attended class, but you didn't do the readings because whatever. And you kind of started feeling uneasy the whole week because you don't know what's going on in class. They seem to be talking about stuff, and other people seem to already know what was going on, but you didn't know anything about it. So you got really scared, right? Week 3, you forgot homework was due that day because you just left your syllabus in the folder. So you asked your professor for a 2-week extension, right, when you attended class, but you were really uneasy about the whole thing and you felt guilty because you didn't get into homework, right? Week 4, you attend class, you realize the exam is next week, and you panic because you have no study material. You're like, what the hell, an exam? I just got here. We literally had 2 classes. What do you mean you're giving me an exam? Now you feel dread because you know an exam is coming, right? By the exam week, you panic, so you go to tutoring, but guess what? The tutoring was absent, or the tutor was absent, so you didn't have any study material. You couldn't find your syllabus to see what the exam actually covered. So in desperation, you read directly from the textbook the whole night before. You forgot the homework that you asked the extension for, and you go to class. You didn't even do that good on the exam because you didn't study that well, right? So we just spent 480 minutes and got no objectives, even though we were trying, right? With a proactive approach, week 1, you saved the syllabus in a special folder. You set up reminders for the exam date and you highlighted the homework assignments, right? Week 2, you attended class, you took some notes on the assigned reading, you're feeling good. Week 3, you remembered to do the homework because your phone reminder, and you go to class. Week 4, you attended class, you took notes, you took your homework to a tutor maybe to review. You received a phone reminder that your exam is coming up, so you're like, uh-oh, I gotta study. Right? So the exam week comes around, you have your combined notes from the homework, from the tutor, from class notes, right? And you put it all into a study sheet. You looked at the study sheet a couple of nights before the exam, and you did it. You get a good grade on your exam. How long did that take? About 200 minutes, and you completed all objectives. So here we have an example of someone spending more time and getting less done than someone who spent less time and got more done. This is what, procrastination kind of breeds. Is that kind of problem, right? So let's talk a little bit about procrastination, and it's heavily tied to the idea of hedonism, right? Hedonism is something that a lot of students hear, and they assume it means, that's someone who just likes to have a good time, right? That if you like to party, if you like to have a good time, you're a hedonist, right? And that's bad. The reality is that hedonism isn't just wanting to have a good time. Wanting to have a good time is human, right? That's something all of us are pre-programmed to do automatically. The reality is that hedonism is the avoidance of pain to maximize pleasure. So if I tell you, hey, to come to this party, you need to pay a $5 cover fee, and you pay it and you go in and you party, you're not a hedonist. You paid to be here. You're doing your bit to make sure everything works. But if you hear about that $5 cover charge, you're like, I will climb in through a window not to pay that. You are a hedonist. You are avoiding the pain of paying $5, but still wanting to party as if you had paid it, right? The trick to avoiding these negative effects of procrastination, of hedonism, is to lean into the work. And I know that sounds counterproductive, or at least not what you would expect. But the fact of the matter is that your workload at LaGuardia, both academic and administrative, is like a finger trap. It's like a Chinese finger trap. If you just try to pull away, it'll constrict you more, and you're going to get anxious, uneasy. If you're always like, don't bother me now, don't bother me now, I don't want to deal with that now, I'll deal with that another day later when I feel ready to deal with LaGuardia, you're going to find that everything is nagging and following you, and there's always a rush, right? But if you lean into it, if you push into the learning, you'll realize that it releases you from your grip. And if it's like, oh, there's something wrong with my financial aid, what's wrong? Oh, my TAP got rejected, they need a new W-4, let me find my W-4 and send it in right now, right? You're not going to feel any anxiety out of that, right? Maybe you'll be a little bit annoyed that you have to deal with more financial aid stuff, but you won't feel threatened out of it, right? And this kind of brings me into an interesting quote from Lao Tzu's The Art of War, right? It's a quote, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, right? So I advise you to do that. When you're at LaGuardia, consider your academic journey a bit of an opponent, right? If you stop attending class for 3 weeks, things could get out of order. You might start failing. You might miss exams, right? Things are going to get hard. This opponent can hurt you if you don't pay attention to it, right? But when you think of your friends, when you think of the people who you want to spend time with on the weekends, I'm sure they're great gals and guys, right? They're not your enemies. They're your friends. So you don't have to keep tabs on them quite so closely, because if you don't go out with your friends for one weekend, they're not going to suddenly turn their back on you. And if they did, maybe they weren't your friends in the first place. Am I right? But the point is that you don't want to ignore LaGuardia. You don't want to ignore your college degree. You don't want to avoid the administrative things you have to do to get through this process. Because at the end of the day, they're not that complicated. And they might be what stand between you and a wonderful future, right? So I know I've been kind of drabbling on. I think it's been about an hour and 15 minutes now. Bear with me, we're almost done. Next, I want to talk about technology, right? Technology is an integral part of the college experience, right? Things like Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, Excel, all of these things are used in the modern workplace. A lot of students seem to think that technological literacy isn't a requirement. It's something weird. You know, LaGuardia is just making me install Teams and I hate it and I'm never going to need this shit again. The reality is you will. Many Forbes 500 companies use Microsoft Teams, right? Many of them will use Outlook and Word. So your time here at LaGuardia now can be spent mastering these tools uh, so that you gain full control. And I'll tell you that someone who can control their technology, someone who's technologically fluid, is a more efficient and effective worker, right? It's one of those things where having technological literacy reduces your overall anxiety in life, right? You want to learn this stuff, and you have this wonderful opportunity to learn it with us here at LaGuardia, right? So I want you to understand that technological skills pay dividends, right? If I ask you to log into Microsoft Teams and to mute certain channels so you only get, you know, announcements from your advisor channel and the tutoring channel because I'm biased, right? If you do that, you'll have a different experience. You might have a better experience than if you installed Microsoft Teams, decided it was too loud, uninstalled it, never looked at it again, right? It's going to make your life easier. I want you to have an easy time through college, or at least a stress-free time through college, right? Another thing I can tell you is Google your tech issues. In the business, this is known as Google Foo, right? And your ability to literally type in the words that describe your problem are a huge skill set, and it's actually really simple to master, right? So let's say you had a question about LaGuardia financial aid, right? A very common thing is a student might message me and say, hey, David, it's Saturday, 8 a.m. I was just wondering, did I hand in my tap okay? Thank you, right? I'm not going to be able to answer that question on a Saturday. I'm not even going to get to it until Monday. And even then, I won't get to it for a while because I might have to come into the office. I might have emails. I might have a meeting. I might have a student coming by. So maybe I don't get back to you until Tuesday morning, right? That student just spent Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday doing absolutely nothing, right? As far as getting his financial aid problem done. So no progress has been made. He's kind of like a baby bird waiting to be fed, right? However, if the same student on Saturday morning was like, let me just Google LaGuardia financial aid real quick to see if I can get a copy of their policy, he might be able to figure out immediately that, yeah, it's done. You handed it in correct. So all of a sudden, his problem got done in 45 seconds, 40 seconds, something like that, versus 4 days and a couple of hours. This is the power of just Googling your issues, right? And it goes beyond just, you know, an institution and a problem. So you can Google like LaGuardia tutoring and you'll find LaGuardia tutoring information. You can Google LaGuardia catalog of classes and you'll find our catalog of classes, right? You can also Google tech issues. So if your professor says, hey, I want you to make a PowerPoint and I want you to play music over your PowerPoint. Maybe you don't remember how to make music play on your PowerPoint. But if you Google Microsoft PowerPoint how to add audio, a tutorial will be available, right? Same goes for anything you can imagine with a program. You know, I want to know how do I do page margins in Microsoft Word. You can Google that. You'll get answers for that, right? Another great example of a technology that you're going to want to tackle and learn is Outlook, right? You can log into your LaGuardia email using Outlook.com, right? At the end of the day, when you look at that email, you're going to get a lot of random emails from the university, right? They're telling you, oh, we have an event coming up. Oh, we have a scholarship coming up. Oh, we have this event coming up. Maybe not everything applies to you, right? But occasionally you might get an email from your ASAP advisor or from your professor. If you set up an email filter, you can put those emails automatically in a separate folder. So if I'm just glancing at my email being like, did I get anything important? And I didn't set up any filters, I would see 28 emails. And I would be like, whoa, buddy, I don't got no time for no 28 emails. I'll check this another day. And I'll ignore it. But if I have that filter set up that says one ASAP message, I'll be like, huh, what was it that ASAP wanted from me? Let me check. So I literally spent 13 seconds glancing at my email, and because I put a little bit of extra work involved in setting up a filter, those 13 seconds paid me back more dividends than if I did not set up a filter, right? Because all of a sudden, at a glance, I can tell, uh-oh, my advisor messaged me. I should check it out. Now, you might be saying, David, I don't know how to set up an email filter in Outlook. Well, congratulations, because there's something you can do here. You can Google how to set it up. I guarantee you there are guides. And how do I guarantee it? I Googled it myself, and the first result was a step-by-step process on how to set up Outlook filters, right? So anytime you run into these issues, Google them, right? The basic saying is if someone else has had this issue, there's a guide available online. This applies for LaGuardia policy. This applies to programs. This applies to anything you might imagine, right? The basic difference that we generally chalk it up to is the difference between being able to Google foo your own problems is the difference between a baby bird who has to be fed by hand and is kind of helpless versus a majestic hawk, I think that's a hawk, who can fish and care for himself, right? So be efficient. Google your issues. Read what you see on the websites. The number of times that we give students a link and they're just like, I don't see anything, is astounding, right? I know that if you don't see it in the first 13 seconds, you might be like, whatever, I'm going to X out and tell them I didn't see anything. But you're wasting your own time. It is going to take you longer. You're going to run out of endurance sooner. You might not even get the task completed because you don't want to expend the effort to read. These are the actual problems we run into, and they might seem very small and minute in when I'm kind of explaining them in a vacuum, but these are behaviors that I want you to look out for. And they're behaviors that if you act upon, if you say, oh, I have a question about financial aid, but rather than just waiting for my advisor, let me Google it so I understand a little bit of what I'm getting into, see if there's information available for me. You might be able to figure it out without having to wait for someone to come and rescue you, right? That's a time advantage. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about communication, right? You're going to write a lot of emails. I can remember being a young guy, not knowing how to write an email, being afraid to send emails to my professors, etc., right? So here we have an example of a basic email handing in work, right? You have it professor at professor.com, no subject line, and you're just saying, hey, here's my work. Okay, if I was a professor, I would be like, yeah, buddy, this is at the bottom of the pile. Like, grab a number and wait. Because at the end of the day, this is actually a pain in the ass. This is the wrong way to write an email. Number one, who are you? I have 5 classes with 30 kids each. Who are you? I have no idea. What class are you even in? I might be teaching 3 classes in one campus and 2 classes in 2 other campuses. I don't even know what school you go to. And what assignment are you handing in? You're just saying, here's my work. Processing this is going to be a long time. I might be able to look at your email, and your email might be like cupcakelover@gmail.com. And it's like none of my kids are named Cupcake Lovers. So what do I do here? Right? They're not even going to want to process. They might straight up ignore this email because it's just so off the cuff lazy that it's like I don't even know where to begin with this, right? A proper way to write your email is as follows, right? You want to write in a subject line, right? In my case, I wrote David Rose is missing SCP-201 section 544 work. And I said, hello, Professor Smith. My name is David Rose, MPID 123456778, and I'm a student in your SCP-201 section 544 class. Attached, you will find my SCP-201 assignment due on 3/22. I spoke to you after class about an extension. My apologies for the late submission. Cordially, David Rose, right? It's straight, it's to the point, it's explaining everything. I'm telling him who I am, where I'm from, what I'm giving him. This takes 2 seconds for him to actually process, right? And by going that extra mile, by giving my MPID, by explaining my section number, I am doing him a favor. I am doing him a courtesy. You will find that when you treat people like this, where you take the time to make sure that processing your information is easy, everything goes smooth as butter. Everyone's happy to see you. Everyone's happy to help you. But if you do this like bare minimum, like, hey, here it is, thanks, everyone's going to be like, oh, jeez, this guy doesn't even know who he is. He doesn't even know what class he's in. No, I have to figure it out for him. Check the back of your shirt. Maybe it's got your name on it. You know, you're acting like a child when you send those emails, right? Now, another thing about email communication or any kind of online communication is that it's okay to send these emails at any time, right? Totally fine. You send it at 2 a.m. It's fine. No one cares, right? But don't expect follow-up for 2 to 4 business days, right? It's going to take 2 to 4 business days for someone to get back to you. So if this is a LAGCC interaction, you want to include your EMP ID. That helps LaGuardia understand who you are, right? So if I'm David Rose, but then 10 years ago there was another David Rose, or even right now there is another one, we would have 2 different EMP IDs. So when I give the EMP ID, they can lock on to exactly who I am, right? You also want to be polite. Speak in full sentences, right? You want to give them the information they need without sounding like you were writing this like in passing on a cell phone, right? But you don't need to add fluff. It can be straight and to the point. You notice that in my email, I wasn't like, the assignment is late because my little brother was having trouble in school and I had to pick him up that day and I didn't have my Metro card, so I had to walk and it took me a lot longer to get to the school because it's like 9 blocks away. And when I finally got there, I found my little brother and we walked back home because I still didn't have enough Metro card money for the bus. And when I finally got back home, it was too late for me to hand it. You don't need to go into all that. You just, here's my assignment. I'm sorry it was late. This is the class I'm in. Bada boom, bada bing. Right? No fluff, straight to the point. Now, let's talk about Zoom etiquette. We're almost there, guys. I want to appreciate all of you sticking through this video. I know that it's not the easiest thing to do, but Zoom etiquette, right? Turning on your camera is usually recommended for most classroom settings, right? If you notice that it's like a large-scale presentation, like you go to a group advisement, maybe you don't need the camera, right? Because it's just you're being presented information. But if you're in a classroom and this teacher is teaching in Zoom, right? And he asks a question, and the room is dead silent. Every camera is off. Every mic is off. I'm telling you right now, be brave. Turn on that camera. Turn on that mic. And be like, Professor, I'll try to answer the question. Even if you get the question wrong, he's going to remember you. And he's going to remember you in a positive light. Because he's going to be like, wow, when no one else was willing to step up to bat, this one kid stepped up and helped me. I really appreciate that. They'll notice these things. So if you notice that the professor's sitting there in an empty room, engage with him. But if you notice that it's a presenter and they're kind of okay with everyone having cameras off, that's okay too, right? All right, guys. So we are almost there. I'm going to speed through the last bit because I'm sure you're somewhat tired of all this, right? But I will have links to a lot of the kind of concepts that I've listed here. So I do have other videos you can watch if you want to know more about any particular area that I've discussed here. But let's just jump right into it, right? So first thing, I want to give you a to-do list. I want to give you something where you can look at it and go down the line and check mark each thing and feel good and be like, yep, that's good to go. So what's the pre-semester to-do list look like? You want to install Microsoft Teams on your PC and your phone. Okay, remember what I was telling you about studying that book for 3 hours and the location affected how much you learned? Microsoft Teams works the exact same way. If you log on to Microsoft Teams only using your phone, you're going to have a hard time. The best option is to use both. You use the phone to get the notification to browse, but when it's time to actually engage with a tutor, with an advisor, with a career team, with anyone, you want to actually be logged onto a PC. And the reason for that is they might ask you for a file, and you can't really easily send files from your phone, but you can easily do it from your PC, right? The next thing you want to do is install your LaGuardia app on your phone, right? That acts as your ID. You also want to review your syllabus for information on class material, right? Make sure you're all good to go with regards to what you're going to be doing. You want to set phone reminders for important dates, right? And finally, you want to research that class material. Like I said, anything you can do to start this learning process outside of the 14 weeks is beneficial, right? Now let's talk about what's happening during semester, right? Your ASAP responsibilities. Now this is something I haven't gone into too much because I'm more focused on your academics than your ASAP, but nonetheless, the two are codependent, right? So every month, you're going to visit your advisor. And I'm not going to read the text in green, but that's how you can get these objectives done if you're having trouble, right? Go to group advisement. That also happens once a month. It'll be pretty easy, right? You want to visit our career services. That happens once per semester, maybe twice. They'll help you with things, but that's something you want to jump on, right? You want to apply to FAFSA each fiscal year. And of course, I spelled fiscal wrong, right? But that's something you do yearly, right? That's a requirement of the program. Now let's talk about the academics, the LaGuardia responsibilities, right? You want to do well in your class and receive a passing grade. That's like number one, right? You want to study regularly, including tutoring, right? We're here to help you. You want to get used to the idea that after a long week of classes, maybe you should cap it off with a trip to the library. And in fact, the library is a wonderful place to meet people, and then when you're done studying, you can go add food. It becomes a social thing, right? You also want to create study sheets and plan to spend most weekends before finals or midterms at the library, right? Typically, exams or college classes will have maybe two, maybe three large scale exams. The more exams, technically, the better. I've had college classes where it's one exam at the end of the year. If you pass, you pass. If you failed, good luck, kid, take it again. So technically, you want more exams than less exams. But usually, there'll be midterms and there will be finals. You should plan to be at the library the couple of weekends before midterms and before finals, right? This is all you got to do to actually make it through LaGuardia, right? And your 4-year for that matter. So hopefully with all that being said, you have kind of a better frame of reference of what you're about to do here, right? This 14-week semester, it might be like a marathon, right? Where you're training and preparing for D-Day, to get started, to jump in the marathon. So, before it starts, you start training. You don't just sit on your butt watching TV until the marathon starts, right? Maybe you see each semester like a battle. You want to double check every detail right before 0 hour, right? You want to give yourself that best shot at winning. You want to exploit every opportunity. So if you know you can act on something now, do it now. And you want to reinforce any weakness. So if you had trouble with something, don't run away. Face it and figure out what is so difficult about this, right? You might see each semester as an obstacle course where you have to avoid issues and only focus on navigating the challenges that matter, right? So your friends might say, hey, I know you have finals next week, but let's go to Cancun. I don't know why Cancun, but you might be like, no, I have to study, right? And if they're really your friends, they're not going to be like, what? Get out of my life. They're going to be like, all right, fine, come next time, right? And finally, if you really get all of this down, each semester feels like a recipe, right? It's really no guesswork whatsoever. It's going to be go to class, take notes, study the notes, prepare a final sheet, take the finals. This is literally the next 6 years of your life. If you're playing the cards right, it's pretty easy, right? And the last thing I'm going to leave you with, before last thing I should say, is you can do this. You are smart enough to do this, right? It's not like you are predetermined to fail. Every single person who is listening to me speak right now has the ability to pass LaGuardia Community College. And I know this because you just sat through an hour and 33 minutes of me talking to you, right? But my point is that whether or not you pass is a matter of the way you use your time. If you chose to go to Cancun, you're going to have a bad time academically. You might have a good time physically, though, but you're going to have a bad time academically. So if you really look at it, this isn't testing how smart you are. This is testing what kind of preparation can you do for these 14 weeks, right? And I know that throughout this whole kind of process, I've been telling you to lean in, to be proactive, to set everything up early. That's hard, right? I remember being a student, and if you told me this stuff, I would have been like, whoa, buddy, slow down, and I'll think about it, and then not think about it, right? But my point is that every time you do this, it gets easier. And I would even say you don't have to do it every day like the little monkey says in this picture, right? I would say you just have to try. So if you end up watching this video, and let's say it's, the week before classes, fantastic. Hop on those early action items I was mentioning and get ready. You still have a lot of time. If it's a weekend before classes, you're still fine. Classes haven't started yet, tackle these issues. If it's the week after classes have started, don't panic. It's better you do it now than never. So there's always a time to kind of pick up the pieces and give it a shot. It just requires your effort, right? So with all that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for all of your time today. I know that this was a very long video. I hope it helped. If you're interested in having your own copy, you can take a picture of the QR. That's the cube on the upper right-hand corner. You can also copy or download or just type in the Canva link, the Student Technology Workshop. That's what you're looking at right now. Right? We also have tutoring resources, ASAP Events website. That's where you can find all of the group advisements, how to download Teams for your desktop and for the phone, right? And then finally, study tips and tricks. Those are videos that go into more detail about the minute things you can do to prepare that study sheet, to prepare for each class, right? So I highly encourage you, use the resources that we're offering you here, and you'll do fantastic at LaGuardia. So, on behalf of the entire ASAP program, I want to thank you for your time today. I know that this was a lot of material, so feel free to watch it again or just Go back and pause it as needed. And best of luck. We are rooting for you. Thank you.